Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Whitcomb. I'm the Manager of Publisher Development at Publica, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. And I'm just going to go ahead and let everybody start introducing themselves and who's on our panel today. And I'll let Patrick, you can start.
Hey, Sarah. Great to be here today. Hi, everybody. My name is Pat McCormack, and I lead business development and global partnerships at Yahoo. So Yahoo was recently rebranded, and we were recently spun out of Verizon, once recently known as Verizon Media. So now we operate independently. And of course, many of you probably know us by our consumer-facing brands of Yahoo Finance, and Yahoo Sports, Yahoo.com. We also operate our own ad tech platforms, including an SSP and a DSP. But it's great to be here today.
Great. Ben, why don't you go next?
Hi guys, I'm Ben Antier. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Publica. Publica is a connected TV ad server, so we work with publishers and device manufacturers to do two things: maximize their ad revenue on connected TV inventory and deliver a TV viewing experience to the end viewer. We were recently acquired by IAS, and together our goal is to bring more transparency to the CTV ecosystem, which is, I think, a topic we'll be talking about more today. So excited to be on, and thanks for everybody for joining.
Awesome. Serge, you can go ahead.
Sure. Hey guys, Serge Matta here, president of LG Ads, head of commercial. LG Ads is basically the new entry in the market. We've been around now for 6 months or so, but we're not totally brand new. We were a majority investment. LG made a majority investment in a company called Alfonso, and we've changed the business model a bit and focused on delivering ad inventory to all sorts of customers from brands and agencies, and really focusing on the monetization of CTV. So happy to be here and talk about what we're seeing in the industry.
Great. Kevin, it's all you.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. So I'm Kevin Maloy. I'm a Senior Director of Advanced TV here at Amobee. I focus specifically on a lot of our cross-platform deployments with major US media companies and broadcasters. Amobee is a global advertising technology company that is focused on the convergence of linear TV and digital video. So we've got TV planning tools, cross-platform planning tools, as well as a DSP that focuses more on the programmatic side of media activation. But very excited to be here and talk a little bit more about connected television.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. I think it's great. We have all sides of the industry, so I think we can have a great discussion. Serge, I kind of want to start with you, which is just how are you guys going to approach CTV monetization, being a manufacturer and having LG Ads?
Yeah, no, good question. So we've been around now from a monetization perspective. Obviously LG is a massive company, but to monetize the inventory that we have either on our O&O or through our content partners, we've created LG Ads. That's been fully on board starting sometime in May of this year. We've built or we are building a sales team both in the US and globally. We look at it from both, depending on how the customers want us to buy our inventory and leverage our inventory. We have screens globally. We have over 120 million screens globally. We have access to the data. We have something called ACR, which is basically a nice way of saying some software that's sitting on the TVs that we're able to see what people are watching. And we leverage that. And then based on what our clients want, if they want to buy it directly through us on our DSP, or if they want to buy it programmatically, we enable all of that. So it's, we're somewhat riding the wave here because CTV is just massive and growing, but we've seen incredible success for the past 6 months. And again, I think the biggest, similar to the other OEMs, the biggest advantage that we have is we're in most homes, not only in the US, but globally. It's been a huge surprise to me, the massive reach. You look at countries like Brazil and all over in LATAM and in Europe, it's incredible, the number of LG TVs that exist all over.
Awesome. And Kevin, from a DSP perspective, what do you think are like the biggest, like how are you evaluating CTV supply from your guys' end right now? And, you know, kind of how does that play into what you see happening in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of different sort of buyer personas that use our platform, and the relationship that they have supply tends to vary. You know, you'll see your sort of just traditional digital focused, digital oriented programmatic buyer, who's typically looking for a curated private marketplace. They might have an agency sort of center of excellence that curates a private marketplace sort of library for them. But oftentimes, you know, really looking for as direct to the source as possible from an inventory perspective. We also see buyers who are really focusing on a, you know, CTV as incremental to linear strategy. I think those same types of relationships exist where you need scale and addressability and decision ability on that portfolio of media in order to find those people who are likely to be incremental to a given linear TV plan. And then we also have a lot of clients who actually use us as a media management platform. So think of the big buyers that go into the upfronts and negotiate linear and digital TV deals. They need a platform to extract as much yield out of that as they can. And our platform uses that. So it's a much more direct relationship buyer to seller versus what we see in some other programmatic relationships. But those are sort of like I guess like the shapes of sort of inventory to buyer relationships that we typically see.
Awesome. And very interesting. I think, Patrick, from a SSP perspective, kind of what are the challenges that you're seeing with CTV today?
Yeah, I mean, you know, first I think I'd comment on, you know, the point that Kevin just made, which is, you know, the direct and most efficient path is really what we're driving for, you know, in creating a CTV marketplace. I think our experience in managing marketplaces related to other ad formats has taught us that it can get pretty confusing pretty fast. And so I think at Yahoo, because we're in a unique position, we operate, you know, what we refer to as our unified stack. So we operate both an SSP that helps publishers monetize. We also operate our own DSP, which helps brands and advertisers reach audiences on all formats, including CTV. So we're very, very tuned into the efficiencies of getting a direct connection that's clean and trusted. We spend a lot of our time focused on making sure that that's the case. You know, I know Kevin just made the point about planning and getting CTV ad impressions that are incremental to linear, which absolutely is the case. We hear that all the time from our partners on the buy side. I'd also say that, you know, we're focused on trying to make CTV a part of an omni-format, omni-channel digital media buy, right? Like just to make it less special in terms of how it sits out to this, perhaps sits out onto the side today and is maybe managed and treated differently. And we really want it to be part of the overall media mix that partners use and activate through our DSP. So we're very focused on those sorts of outcomes.
And Ben, from your perspective, I'm hearing a lot about forecasting and, figuring out, we don't have traditional upfronts quite yet in CTV. So, how is Publica solved for, that problem?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting to get all perspectives in from one question, right? From, Serge and LG having inventory all over the world, having access to first-party data, to Amobee, trying to bring brands as close to the publishers as possible, which can be challenging in a programmatic marketplace. And then Pat, you're, talking about the same thing, talking about bringing, the two together in an optimized way. Really what we're doing at Publica is we focus on the publishers and we help them achieve those goals. We help them monetize their inventory in the most efficient way possible, right? So what's great is we've kind of leapfrogged, what in display took years to get to, and we're in a place where we're seeing, at least today, especially in the US, is very advanced usage of programmatic, right? So today, pretty much every single client that we work with has a strategy where they put direct sales in competition with programmatic PMPs, PG deals. So it's no longer that, there's inventory that's sold at the upfront and then everything else is kind of remnant inventory, and you use maybe one SSP platform to monetize that. It's really about making sure for a publisher that they have the right pipes, they're connected to the right demand partners, so that anybody that has the right data point to, you know, submit a high value bid for a particular user can do so, and can do so in a trusted way. So yeah, I think it's you know, the whole challenge is about creating these connections and then helping both the buy side and the sell side understand, you know, what they're buying, what they're selling, who they're selling to, or who they're buying from. And that's what we work on every day. So still a lot to be done. I think in terms of, you know, the challenges, certainly when you talk about unifying linear and you know, connected TV, there's still many things to be done there. And I think, you know, Serge, you're in an incredible place to solve that problem, right? Having the ACR data, which really gives you intel into both. I think that solves for really, you know, the problems that Kevin was talking about.
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, in some respects, CTV has leapfrogged, and that's what you've seen from other industries, right? From other, like from online video, from other, it has learned a lot and has been, and it's applying it. And you can see it based on the growth rates that we're seeing in CTV this year and what we expect to see next year. But there are still a lot of challenges. There's no doubt about it. Now, the ACR, like ACR data was available to a lot of companies in the past. We've somewhat taken a different approach as of recently and tried to make it more exclusive. Exclusive for us. The other OEMs have done the same thing. And as a result, there's a very little scarcity in the market of ACR, and it's increased its value significantly, right? But we're able to, in a privacy-friendly manner, able to see all of what's going on in terms of what the consumer is actually watching, and then leveraging and then building really finite and scalable audiences. That's the key here, is how do you then build based on what people are watching on linear, on CTV, on OTT, and just saying, okay, now let's build audiences for activation purposes. And whether that activation happens on a managed basis or programmatic, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. We're seeing the growth in programmatic like it's no one's business. It's unbelievable what we have been able to see just in the past couple of months. But again, when you overlay the ACR data on top and create really granular based audiences, and then when you have the reach, that's what makes this a really compelling story. But there's still challenges, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Patrick, how are you guys solving those kind of challenges that Serge was just talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I agree. It's definitely the early innings, and we're figuring out how to make these marketplaces more efficient. When it comes to things like you know, managing access to audiences and controlling frequency and ad duplication and things of that nature. I mean, I know there are a number of initiatives across the industry. I think the one that we're specifically focused on at Yahoo is related to our universal ID. So we, because we're a publisher and we operate our own publishing assets, we have relationships with over 200 million logged in and registered users on our services. And so those are trusted direct consumer connections where you know, consumers are engaged with Yahoo products and services. We make some of that available, some of that data available to our advertising partners and to our publishing partners, but that is increasingly a way that we're helping to you know, solve the question of who am I buying this ad from, you know, what audience am I reaching, you know, am I achieving my campaign objectives by delivering this campaign, you know, in this particular context. And so we're very focused on you know, growing and doubling down on our Connect ID solution. But yeah, again, you know, that's one of many initiatives on our side.
Yeah, Kevin, do you see a lot of interest from buyers on those kind of transacting on those specific IDs, or, you know, what is buyer feedback on, you know, kind of this unified ID work that's being done?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely necessary, right? We need to future-proof the initial promise of programmatic, which was the sort of thesis that applying audience data to my media purchasing decisions drives better outcomes for me as a brand. And what that requires is, you know, good TV data, understanding of who's actually watching, you know, a given screen at a given time. But also like contextualizing some of that data. Are you using it for measurement? Are you using it for targeting? Is this a currency grade data source? And then how does that data get exchanged between buyers and sellers in a way that encourages more transparency, but also drives those results that the buyers are actually looking for, right? So we've seen some interesting moves, I think, in market from some of the bigger broadcasters and, in Disney and NBCU launching sort of clean room initiatives. We've seen other broadcasters lean into some more sort of like IDL-like solutions where you're getting, those types of IDs. But it's going to take that collaboration and that transparency to really start to shift the market. But I think it does all come back to the fact that regardless of whether you're planning, you're executing, you're measuring, or trying to even take that farther down to like an attribution-based solution, there has to be something in place there.
Yeah, to be honest, a universal ad ID, it sounds great. I think everybody would support it, right? Everybody says they support it, but it's really hard to implement. It is, we're not kidding. And it hasn't been successful in the past. I can't even think of any scenario where it has been successful. Everybody wants it. I think it's all gravy, that's great. But when it comes down to it, everybody ends up doing their own thing, which is really unfortunate, right? And if there was be more collaboration among all of us, including the OEMs, including others, that's where I think this industry can go and increase significantly. But it's end up becoming, everybody creates siloed version of themselves. And then what ends up happening is you have 5, 10 different, I hear it every single meeting I attend. How are we going to measure these campaigns? And do we know your measurement is different from everybody else's measurement? If we have one campaign and we have 4 different OEMs, are we getting the same measurement across all the 4 OEMs? Is it consistent? And these are hard questions to answer. And until that happens, now, don't get me wrong, the growth is going to continue in CTV, but we have to resolve this. But these things, you're going to have to butt heads a bit until we all come into because it's hard. Just that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I agree. I think right now we're in the state of the growth of this segment in the industry that it's too hard, right? Like it can't, we've got to figure out how to make CTV easy and make it turnkey so that, becomes a mainstream part of the way that media is planned and bought. But right now it does feel a little bit too hard. So I think that's, the interesting part is how do we come together as an industry? And, in a lot of cases where we're used to kind of co-opetition or it's an interesting dynamic, and for those of us who've been in ad tech for a long time, it's interesting that way about how our competitors are also our industry ecosystem partners, and we depend on each other to plow through some of these obstacles. So I totally agree. Actually, in a lot of ways, I part of my career I spent in the mobile app ecosystem, and to me, where we are in CTV today feels a lot like the early days of mobile app, where it was a consumer mega trend. Eyeballs were flooding to these screens, but the media spend and the media dollars didn't marry up to the amount of consumer engagement that were happening on mobile phones. And I think the same is true today in CTV. So as an industry, I think we've got to come together and work on standards, work on solutions together, and evangelize the benefits of reaching audiences and the benefits of reaching audiences on connected television, for sure.
And I'd even add that, what we have to compare ourselves to is really the social platforms today that do this incredibly well, right? If you want to target people as an advertiser today, you go to Instagram or, Facebook, wherever, but that's the state of the art today in people-based marketing, right? And we have to get there as an industry. We have to be able to provide that level of targeting in a privacy compliant way, and we do that by coming together. And I think it's interesting. Programmatic IO was happening earlier this week. Today, that when you walk into a conference like that, there's hundreds of data providers, right? Hundreds of companies that all are playing in this space and have different solutions. And well, that's great, but really, if they're not all speaking the same language, it's very difficult to use, right? So I completely agree. I think it's about unifying. I think there are some really interesting initiatives that are happening across the industry right now. I think publishers are driving a lot of them because they own the data, right? Whether it's Yahoo, LG, where you guys are talking about having that proprietary data makes you kind of decide what you're going to do with it. But then you also have advertisers bringing their own data sets, right? And you need to be able to tie those together. So some really cool initiatives. I just had the last part is about giving the data to both sides so that they can plan, right? It's not just about execution. It's also about planning. It's about knowing, okay, how many auto intenders am I going to actually have the week leading up to Thanksgiving, right? That's the type of question we need to be able to answer if we want to not only transition budgets from linear TV to CTV, but also from social media to connected TV.
And honestly, that's where, at least for our Cs, what we're hearing from our clients is the planning tools, leveraging the ACR data is hugely valuable. We have to then decide, we have to make sure that it's for planning purposes and not for activation purposes, so that we're not creating headaches for ourselves. But that's where I think this is going, right? Is leveraging the granular data for planning from linear to CTV.
I think we've addressed a lot of like really good problems that buyers are having, kind of how we're trying to solve for them. But what about the user experience in CTV? Because we're still trying to make sure that that's similar to linear. So I'm curious, Serge, like how are you going to be handling the ad breaks and that user experience so that you keep people watching on your LG devices?
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue is really the discoverability of it, right? Is like, how do you go and make that use from a user experience just easy? Even on an LG TV, today we have within the LG channels, we have 300 plus channels on the LG channel. Then you have all sorts of content partners and you have all of these apps outside. And can that user experience be improved? Sure. There's all sorts of, you look at us, you look at Samsung, you look at Roku and others. It's, to me, that the biggest thing is how do you improve the discoverability? Because that to me is, and that, and we're working on it, but it can get really, just from a regular general consumer, they can get easily lost. And where do I go? And, recommendation engines based on what you have, based on who you are, based on your audience profile, based on what you have watched before, and focusing on that could be something that is probably going to be coming soon from all sorts of different vendors. But I just have to I have to believe that you've got to improve that, or else what ends up happening is consumers are just going to go and watch their 2 or 3 apps that they usually do. They'll watch the Netflixes of the world and HBO Max, and that's it. And they will ignore everything else. And and if you don't make that easy for them and make it, leveraging AI and leveraging all of the information that we have, it would be a shame, because it's a huge opportunity.
I mean, I totally agree, right? The consumer buys cars and the consumer drives tune-in metrics for the people selling that media, which is additional ad revenue, right? And so, if there's 4 parties in any transaction when a CTV impression is being traded, the buyer, the seller, the consumer, and the technology, I think what we see is, there are technology solutions to managing this frequency problem. I think to Patrick's point, it's going to take some collaboration. It's going to take lean in from both sides. And it's going to take investment from both buyers and sellers to say, here's what we want this experience to be, whether it's your advertising experience that's, controlled across multiple publishers and is appearing in, brand safe, quality, professionally produced, connected television content. And from a seller's perspective, to make sure you're not, overburdening the user with the same ad experience over and over again, which frankly is something I think we've all talked about for like 5 years, and it still happens to be a pretty prevalent issue in the market.
And sorry, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, sorry, Ben. I was just going to say, I think about the user experience, right? It starts with the discoverability. It continues on through to the, what Kevin was just addressing with, duplication and frequency management and things like that. The other part that I'd add there is that I think as a publisher, publishers they've got to manage multiple sales channels and try to figure out what's the best way to drive yield against the ad breaks against this content. So if you've solved, the discoverability of your content and you've built an audience, and then you've solved, kind of, or at least attempted to solve some of the user experience part of it, the next problem in line becomes, what's the most efficient way to take this inventory to market? And, we on the SSP side of our business, we spend a lot of time with our partners kind of coaching and counseling them on even basic stuff like transparency. So there'll be certain content object metadata that is made available through certain programmatic channels, but not others. So as an example, in a particular deal, that deal may be fully transparent and available to the buyer, and that buyer, it may just be a one-to-one deal where all of those parameters are fully transparent. And in an open marketplace, the content object metadata may be kind of throttled back a little bit to make it a little more restrictive. But that really is just the publisher managing their respective sales channels and trying to influence where spend goes and how buyers engage. So there are complexities to the market that I think we're making progress on, and it all does come back to transparency in the end, which is an interesting observation from the publisher side.
Yeah, we hear that all the time from our clients saying, I want to know where my ads ran. I want it down to the app level. And it's something not at the genre level, not anything. I want it down to the app level. And it's something that, we're working with them side by side with them, but that is the level of granularity that that the advertisers are looking for.
Obviously, I could echo everything that was just said. I think it's spot on. And we spend a ton of time working with publishers, first helping them understand what it is that they're making available to the buy side, right? Most publishers have never seen a bid request. So they, when you show them, hey, this is what people are buying your inventory on. It's like if you're going to an auction selling a painting and you've never seen the painting, right? When someone shows it to you, you're like, oh, okay, now I can, make something out of that. So yeah, absolutely. I think we're going in the right direction on that front. I'd add on the transparency side, that we also have to give transparency to the buy side on the ad experience. So if we really want to be held accountable, we have to be able to tell Coke, hey, these are the ads you ran, within that ad break against, right? Did you run next to Ford or Pepsi? And then at the session level, how many times did that viewer see an ad of your category of food and beverage, things like that, right? So there's transparency on the content, but then there's also transparency on the ads. And, for me, at least having been acquired by IAS, and I'm learning a lot about that buy side that we haven't heard about at all. And I think, being able to bring the two together is what everybody's asking for. Technically, it's absolutely feasible. So it's a problem that, we're already solving. And ultimately, it's just about, giving the right tools dashboard so that it comes to life easily. But that's one where I'm very confident that we're very, close to solving as an industry, because it's not rocket science to let someone know what show was running before the ad and what ads ran, right?
And, addressing frequency capping and down. So yeah, no, these are all, to be honest, everything that you mentioned is a lot easier to solve than some of the universal ad ID concept, for example. Those are easy. These are things that are much, much easier to handle. And a lot of that, in a lot of cases, are already happening today.
Yeah. Well, I think too, and this might sound silly, but like part of the challenge is that it is so easy to solve from certain perspectives and a little more challenging to solve from other perspectives, right? Like I think we talk about convergence and CTV being this vehicle that will drive convergence in the industry because it's a TV-like format through digital pipes. But oftentimes I do think, you really have two stakeholders for connected television. You've got the programmatic stakeholder who wants to do, real behavioral targeting with, digital KPIs associated with a campaign and make that, to Pat's point, part of their larger digital programmatic offering. And then you have a lot of TV folks that are getting involved as well. And I think what convergence should be about is how do we take what TV buyers like and dislike about the TV buying experience and marry that to what the digital buyers like and dislike about the digital buying experience. And, I don't think we've completely cracked that nut, which is why we have these kinds of conversations as much as we do. Like the answer is not programmatic guarantee versus open market, right? There's there's complexities that, right? And Ben, I think where you guys are doing some really interesting stuff is like, what is a bid? Can we give that bid more context, right? A $10 bid from someone who's going to spend $100 million with me is probably more valuable than a $30 bid for someone who's spending 150 grand with me. And like, these are the, I think like getting, getting that convergence piece solved requires getting everybody comfortable and getting everybody excited about, getting into transacting this inventory more holistically, which requires everything else that we talked about today, and transparency and data and addressability and measurement.
So I think from everything that we've talked about so far, one thing I'm kind of interested in is how we're actually dealing with things as they are today, which I know tends to be with like a lot of private marketplace deals versus the open marketplace. And I'm just kind of curious where you guys see that going, and if you see that mix of PMPs changing in the future or like quickly. I mean, we obviously have a few problems to solve here, but does anyone have any thoughts on what that's going to look like?
Yeah, I would start by saying, the vast majority of the business we do in CTV today is done through deals, which, I think makes a lot of sense in terms of connecting, to quality supply and making sure that you've, limited or reduced the possibility of any fraud entering the equation or things of that nature. The problem with deals is that inherently they're not super scalable, right? If you've got to stop and pause and create, a one-to-one connection or even a one-to-many connection for every time you'd want to transact, it's just not super scalable. So I do think we've got to figure out a way as an industry to take better advantage of, inventory. I know many of our publishers today, our publisher partners, have experienced, exponential growth. Serge, you mentioned this a moment ago, like you can't believe how quickly the business is growing. And, I think the nature of content that's distributed across CTV, is a lot of it is the news and sports and sort of the spiky type of content that, here on the East Coast in the US, we just had terrible weather. I'm sure, streaming weather services saw a spike in their ad inventory, and you can't always fill that with reserved demand. So there's a place for programmatic to help fill those spikes in consumption. So I do think, and you don't always have the time to create deals to enable the capture of value against that spike in consumer engagement. So I think we do have to try to figure out where's the open exchange fit into this industry, and then how do we get people more comfortable with transacting there.
Yeah, I think on our end, so while I agree, I think we might be a bit different because we also have our own inventory. So in some of those cases, like we have native display and video ad units, both in the US and globally, and that we haven't yet provided on the exchanges or through programmatic basis. So we're seeing a lot of that for sure. But I think it's kind of a half and half, and then the rest is PMPs. And the challenge with PMPs is, as we all know, running businesses is yes, this 100% the starts, the stops drives everybody crazy, but it's also the lack of being able to forecast. It's just downright impossible, right? And you have no idea how or when or what is going to be spent. And you have they can give you some sort of, if you want to do programmatic guarantees, but those are not as much as just you go to the advertiser and say, yep, we'll start a deal ID. We'll just create a deal ID and let's go. But good luck trying to figure out how much that PMP is actually going to generate for you. And then you just have to wait. And that, to me, that would drive anybody that's trying to run a business insane, right? And that's just, unfortunately, that's just reality.
Well, and what a good time to establish, best practices for that exact scenario, right? We have, it's connected television compared to mobile or desktop. The bench of publishers is much smaller, just as a factor of user experience, right? It's not a fingertip experience. You have your remote in your hand. To get something new, you have to download it. There's latency, it takes a while. So we do see a smaller cast of characters involved, right? So, which makes those direct relationships a lot easier. I think on top of that, we see viewership concentration to those top 5, top 10 apps, right? Heavily concentrated to streaming on those handful of applications. And then at the same time, we know that, fraud follows the money, right? And I think that takes a technology solution as well as like a sort of a gut check solution, right? I mean, it was March of 2020 when it was the Three Stooges application was generating millions of dollars in revenue on redirected app requests, where if you just kind of sit back and think, are more people watching the Three Stooges than any other original piece of content? Like, probably not. Probably not. And so what'll be really interesting is like how you establish these direct relationships now, scale them as they start to grow. And then, Serge, I think as you're, as you guys are the glass and as other, sort of pieces of hardware involved with the distribution of this content, start to change that user experience, and we start to see more of a diversification of publishers. I think that's going to become, where the open market opportunity is. And I think too, we'll start to see that, where the bulk of CTV ads are displayed today are frankly on some of the largest media companies in the US, right? These are traditionally kind of more upfront style reserved media deals. And what does the style of that look like? What pieces of programmatic do we start to introduce to those, transactions to make them look and feel and give the buyers more value out of it, which is certainly something I know a lot of folks are investing in.
You crack me up on the Three Stooges, but you couldn't be more right, because we're going to be, that was insane.
Did you guys put it at the top of your app store, Serge? Was that what happened?
I think we're all right. We're okay with that. We're all right.
I mean, maybe just to add a comment on the open marketplace. I spent the past 10 years working on programmatic, right? So I'm a huge believer in the fact that if inventory is bought and sold programmatically at scale, it creates value for everybody in the space. So I do think we're going to go towards more and more open buying with more control, better safety tools around it. And some of the latest standards that we've come up with the IAB Tech Lab, I think, go a long way into achieving that, whether it's the app ads.txt, AdCert 2.0, which I encourage everybody to check out. It's basically server to server cryptographic security to secure the supply chain, so that you don't have to set up a PMP to trust who's sending you that bid request. So we're making progress there. I do agree that the nature of TV is that there's going to be upfront commitments and large spend. So it's not going to be an open marketplace like we've known it in display, right? I think it's going to be a new paradigm that comes forward, but much more automated than what it is today. In the next few years, it'll get towards that.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, sort of more digital ad insertion into linear feeds, and just like the massive amount of ramifications that would come out of that from a currency perspective to who controls the glass perspective, and how is that traded. But certainly agree with all the others as well.
I think I'm wondering kind of, linear TV advertisers are spending in CTV today, but is it the same mix for digital advertisers? What are you guys seeing with what the buying is right now from Yahoo and Amobee's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said at the top, we're really encouraging our clients on the buy side to think about this as kind of an omni-format, omni-channel type of planning and buying opportunity. So you can take advantage of all of the benefits of CTV and digital addressability with this format. And I think we've seen a lot of success. We've seen a lot of our partners use our DSP to kind of plan and execute all of their digital media formats, including CTV. And so that's a trend that, it makes a lot of sense operationally, right? You'd rather not, as anybody who's running any project would rather not divide it into separate execution paths. You'd rather try to bring it all together and do it all at once. So I think, we believe there's some efficiencies there. Our partners are asking us for that. So we're building solutions to help make that possible. And, I see that trend continuing into the future.
Yeah, and I think too, like those groups are coming together a lot more than they have in the past, right? So there's certainly some buyers who have completely bifurcated, buying apparatus where, the linear team will acquire connected TV in the upfronts, and the programmatic team will go off and buy in a DSP, because they have different objectives, they have different goals, and they're paid on different KPIs. At the same time, I think what's really exciting about connected television right now is we're opening up a lot more collaboration channels between those groups. Meaning, maybe I go buy the linear TV and the digital TV, but I have a team that sort of figures out how to manage that. Maybe I buy TV and I produce a digital data set that allows my programmatic team to be more complementary in their programmatic buying to what I've already purchased in linear television. And I do think like those that are leaning in most heavily to, solving that problem are extracting a ton of value because they're getting more value out of the connected television that they're buying today, and they're able to start, optimizing toward more advanced KPIs. And I think too, the sellers have a lot to do with that, right? There are, most of the major U.S. media companies are investing in cross-platform planning, right? So how do I actually incentivize buyers to come to the upfront and spend the optimal amount in digital, right? Like there are ways of determining, given an audience and a set of targeting criteria and allocation rules and constraints, here's the best way to spend the money for the people you're looking for across my footprint. So I do think like one of the most exciting pieces is starting to see those real true lines deteriorate, which will come with much better expertise, I think, within the industry. Having programmatic heavy folks learn a lot more about linear television, having linear TV folks understand, to Ben's point, what a bid looks like, right? And that's going to take a lot of work and collaboration, which I think has to happen, in every buyer, seller, and technology company's, company within.
On our end, it's interesting. When we started, you see the cross-platform buying from the broadcasters, right? You kind of have to they're spending on the platforms, on the OEMs. It makes sense because it's an extended reach play. But what we have seen lately is the increased surgence of other categories. So it's no longer just, okay, it's got to be media and entertainment, right? So what we're starting to see now is the insurance category, the telecommunications category, retail, apparel, the resurgence of cruises. It's becoming a very, very diversified, at least from our client set, that it's no longer just focused on media entertainment, which is kind of in a lot of cases, you could argue it's a must buy.
I think overall we've really had a great discussion on how CTV has started and where it's going and what our problems that we need to solve are. And as we kind of wrap up the end of this, I really would love to hear from each of you what you think, your predictions are based on all of your wealth of knowledge, for the next coming year. If anyone wants to volunteer.
I think we have to solve the measurement piece. I really think that has to come through. I think what we're also hearing in the industry is leveraging the data based on outcomes. If we can figure out there's so many meetings we go to, is how do I make sure that this CTV buy that I just did resulted in XYZ outcome, right? And well, I'm not asking for guarantees, but wouldn't surprise me if in a year or two that's where this industry is heading. Right. And outcome based, now you have to realize it comes with a price in terms of scale and all of that. But it's something that we're starting to hear. And I think both the measurement, first party data obviously being critical, measurement, and then eventually at some point the outcome based approach, I think, is going to be critical.
Yeah, actually, you just, Serge, made me think of something we haven't really touched on today at all, which is creative formats. So I think what came to mind when you talked about, performance marketing on CTV was what we are seeing increasingly are like QR codes that are part of the ad creative, sure. Right? And so it'll be really interesting over the next year plus to see how creative for CTV kind of takes the best of what we learned in performance marketing in other digital formats. And, we're not just repurposing the 15 and 30-second TV spots that have been created. In many cases, that might be the best creative to use for the campaign, but in other cases, there are things you can bring into the creative mix that make CTV more interactive. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. Additionally, I think there's a whole host of the advertiser buy-side community that doesn't play in television today because they don't have the budgets to produce creative. So how do small and medium-sized businesses play in the CTV space, I think, is another interesting opportunity for the industry. So we'll keep our eye on how creative shapes up in CTV this year.
I would just disagree on the one thing because we've agreed on everything. So I don't believe in QR codes. We'll see. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think it's more of a trend, and ultimately, I
COVID
think
helped
it's gonna be,
resurgence of QR
Have you
codes.
gone to
So,
a restaurant recently, man?
that's for sure.
not in TV ads. That's
Oh,
I'm
not
not seeing
indeed.
it.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Well, at restaurants, I've given up on that. They've clearly made it, but yeah, I don't think it's going to TV ads. I think it's going to be, but we're going to need to achieve the same. I mean, I completely agree on that. Outcome-based measurement. I do think with TV being the center of the household graph, right? The TV is the one device that it stays in the house where everything else is on the go. So I think that's going to make it absolutely instrumental when it comes to outcome-based measurement. You want to know if someone bought something on a desktop, what was the last ad they saw on CTV? And I think we're going to be seeing that come to market very soon. The other trend to me that is going to be really fun is, back to your first point, Serge, is international. The US is, in my opinion, 2 to 3 years ahead on compared to everywhere else in the world from a CTV buying and selling, but the viewers are all there. They're all over the world. They've bought connected TVs. They're using them. So I think for all of us, it's going to be super fun to ride that wave worldwide, and hopefully help them. Help these new markets leapfrog the 2 to 3 years of stumbling that we've been through here, and just get them straight to the best setups where they can make the most amount of money for the publishers and get the best ROI for the advertisers.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all right on. I think we're going to have, maybe not 100% shoppable ads in the CTV experience, but we're definitely going to see a lot more interactivity. I think the data landscape and the measurement landscape, and frankly, the currency landscape is definitely going to be something that I'm going to be keeping my ear to the ground on this year. I think from my perspective, like where I'm laser focused and where I think we're going to see a lot of development is this world of cross-platform. And convergence of the way linear and digital buyers think about approaching the market, and how linear and digital sellers think about approaching the market. And I think those two things have to do with it. That convergence has to do with everything else that we talked about, right? How do you measure it? What's the currency that we're using for it? How do we optimize an ad experience for it across different platforms? And then how do we get the expertise to come work for us to actually truly work across linear and digital, without a million Slack questions back and forth in the background of a meeting.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to talk to us. And we will have this recording available afterwards. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.